So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Llama 3.2 to build a very simple but powerful application. So this application is going to allow you to pass in a textual file that contains different items for a grocery list. And then we're going to use our large language model, in this case Llama 3.2, to categorize that list. And then on top of that, the same model is going to randomly pick a category of those items that we have on our list, okay, and then generate a recipe for us. The great thing about using Ollama, have access to different kinds of large language models, and most importantly, it's all local and we don't have to pay for using the large language model, which is a huge win-win. So it's all going to be local and $0 that you need to pay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So as you see here, I have my project categorizer. I have set up the virtual environment, and you should be able to do that so that I'm able to pass in or pull in different dependencies that I may need. And also I already have this categorizer.py. Let me make this a little bit larger so you can see. And I also have this data folder directory here, which has this grocery list.txt. So if I click, you can see it's just a list, a grocery list that has different items: coffee, strawberries, lettuce, and apples. So this is what we're going to use as the input. Just think of this as an actual grocery list that you may have. The first thing we must do, of course, is make sure that we have Ollama installed and set up on our machine. If you don't know how to do that, I have a full video where I show you exactly how to do. Just find it somewhere here. And next, once you have Ollama set up on your machine, then you need to pull Llama 3.2. Now you can use any other model from Ollama, but in this case, I'm going to be using Llama 3.2 because that's what I have. Okay, so again, if that makes no sense, I have a video that goes through the whole process of installing, set up Llama 3.2 on your machine. Once you have that, make sure that you're actually running Ollama on your machine. So it's going to be an actual application that needs to run on the background. That way you're able to access the large language models. Okay, so the first thing, let's go ahead and say pip install Ollama, because we need to install that so that we have all the libraries and everything we need to start running our model. So let me go ahead and do some imports real quick here. So I'm going to use the OS, the async IO. This will allow us to generate, this will allow us to simulate an API call that might happen. Okay, we have the random. This is, we'll see later, it's going to allow us to randomly pick and choose something from a list. And we have Ollama here, but we're getting the async client. Okay, that's the flavor we're getting because everything is going to happen asynchronously. Of course, we're also importing JSON. The first thing I like to do is to create a variable called Llama that has Llama 3.2, because this is the model we're going to be using in this example. First, let's go ahead and go to the data folder or directory and pull this grocery list.txt. So we already have a code for that. Let me go ahead and go grab it so I can show you exactly how that happens. All right, so we have here our function. So we load grocery list, we pass in the path, and of course we use the path that exists to make sure that that path exists or not. If that's the case, if it doesn't exist, we're going to just say it does not exist. And we return an empty list, as you see here. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and read everything from that file, in this case just txt, and then we are going to return those items. So we're going to extrapolate all of those things that we are going to find in our txt and then return that. Next, what we're doing here is we're going to simulate some sort of an API call. So the idea is we want to get all the information from the txt file, the list of grocery list, and then we want to simulate a case where we could call an API to get, for instance, the price of each one of those items, as well as the nutritional value for each one of the items we have inside of our list, because we want to make things easier here. But you can easily swap what I'm going to show you here with an actual call to an API. So here we go. So we have this fetch price and nutrition. So the idea is that we're going to pass each one of these items that we get from our grocery list, and then we're going to wait just to make this simulation that we would be doing or would happen if we were to call an actual API. Okay, so we're going to say fetch data from 04 item that we pass. In this case, we're going to return a random price, calories, fat, and protein. Change this by actually calling an API out there. So there we go. So this is just going to be the mock data that is returned. Okay, now let's go ahead and do the fetch recipe. We haven't even gotten to the organizer or to the categorizer function yet. So I'm just giving you all the functions we need. Okay, so we have this larger function here called fetch recipe. So the idea again is that we pass the category, this assuming after we have categorized the grocery list, and we're going to pass also the client, which is going to be the model. So first we're going to construct the recipe prompt, okay, for the model to know what it needs to do. It says here, as a chef, create a recipe in the category, which is going to be passed along. So the category could be pastry or could be dairy and so forth. And then we have instructions here. Now, always, as I said, you have to remember, in order for your large language models to be able to do things well, you have to invest time in prompting, in creating prompts that actually make sense. Okay, so instructions here provide the recipe as a valid JSON object. Do not include any text before or after the JSON. Use double quotes for all strings and ensure the JSON is properly formatted. And then here I'm passing the example of a JSON format. So it's going to be recipe name, and then the key is going to be, or the value is going to be the actual recipe name. Ingredients going to be a list, for instance, and instructions and so forth. So this is the recipe prompt, which is going to be passed along to the large language model. All right, and then we pass the messages. In this case, we're passing the user role and the content. So essentially, we're passing the recipe prompt here, which will have the category that is been passing along as a parameter. And then once we have all that information, that's when we call our client and we say chat, okay, and pass the model and also the messages. And I put here for my JSON. I'm not quite sure if Llama 3.2 actually honors this. Okay, so then we're going to parse the model's response just to get the actual content. Go through message and then get the content. All right, and then we print here the assistance response and we should get that. The thing here is that we're going to use the regular expression here, regex, to extract JSON objects in case that we need. So I just wrote something here that goes ahead and extracts everything from the response to make sure that we are going to extract only the JSON items. Now there's better ways of doing this, but in this case this works. Add the category to the recipe, that's what we're doing here, and return that recipe. Now I'm going to create a main function. So it's going to be async, and here I'm going to first go ahead and load the grocery list. So I'm going to call the grocery list and go ahead and pass the path, which is going to be data like this, because remember I put this under data. Okay, so we get that grocery list, and then I'm going to pass an if statement at the bottom here, just in case things don't go as expected. So say if not grocery list, then we're just going to say it's empty. All right, now let's create our client, because we need to have that client which is going to do what we need to do, right? This is the actual model. Our model to know what to do in essence, because it needs to understand, okay, I have certain responsibilities, but I need to know if I can't meet those responsibilities, what tools do I have at my disposal to actually call and be able to get what I need to get done. That's why I'm going to be using tools. A tool, in this case, is the function to do what it needs to do and then receive a response from that tool, if there's a response, and then continue do what large language models do. Now for that, we need to create a list, which we would, of course, define as some sort of map. Okay, so you can see we define the functions tool for the model. So usually you put inside of a list because you could have more than one tool, more than one function. And what we pass here is very important. You can see it's a JSON format. You need to pass the type, it's a function, and the actual function object here, dictionary, which will have a name. And it's important to remember that this name that we pass here has to be exactly the same name as the function that we've created at the top here, which was fetch, price, and nutrition. has to be exactly the same, and we pass in the description of what this function does. In this case, fetch price and nutrition data for a grocery item. And we also have to specify the parameters. In this case, it's going to be an object type, and the item is going to be string, and we pass the description as well. What is this item thing? Well, it's a string, and it is the name of the grocery item. Okay, and we specify whether that parameter is required. In this case, we say required, it's item. Now, if you had more parameters that need to be passed, of course, we would pass them along here, but we only have one, and that's why we only have one. So this is the tools, so say tools, we could have more than one tool, but it just have one tool. So this is what's used by the large language model, as we see, to know what to call when it needs to do something extra that it doesn't know how to do. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and go to the step 1, which is where we're going to categorize items using the model. Now, we could have put this in a function, but it's okay. We're just going to do it here. So I have this prompt here, categorize prompt. So essentially, we're saying you're an assistant that categorizes grocery items, and we pass in the instructions here. So return the result only as a valid JSON. Do not include any explanations, greetings, or additional text. Ensure the JSON is properly formatted and all of that great stuff. And we also pass in the format that is desired. Now, this is just naming, so I'm going to go back here. We call it grocery list, not grocery items. Okay, let's just add there. So essentially, we're joining whatever we're passing along with the prompt. So in this case, grocery list is going to be added, so it knows exactly this categorized prompt. It knows what data it needs to use and put it all together and pass to the large language model. All right, so once we have that, of course, let's go ahead and create the actual message again, because we'll be dealing with the large language model. So again, the role user content is going to be categorized prompt, which it's going to be this prompt here. Very good. So we're getting there. Now let's go ahead and do the first API call. I say the first because we have other call we need to make to do something else, which we will see here. By the way, if you are loving what you're seeing here, I have a community that I have opened up where I go deeper into actually showing people how to build AI-based solutions. So in this community, we're going to have classrooms, we have calendar, leaderboards, and so many things. But what I want you to look at here is that it is a full-fledged community that I'm building out to dive deep into AI and actually build real-world solutions using AI. And we have this personalized learning paths to set goals and to build chatbots, fundamentals of large language models, basics for builders, and many, many other things. But one of the great things about this community is that you will see right now here, I don't have anything, but we'll have events, Zooms or Hangout events where you have access to me and other members of the community to ask questions, and I can do presentations, and sometimes I can call experts in the industry and I can interview them. So that way you are aware of what's going on. So it's a place where you're actually going to be building and doing things with AI. So coming back here, so we have our messages here, and that is what we're going to be feeding into the large language model. So here's our first call to the API. It says here first API call, but this essentially would be first model call. So this is going to categorize our items. Very simple. We just use the client. That's Ollama. This is Llama 3.2. And we'll say chat, and we pass in the model messages. Remember, this message is what we have here, which instantly has the categorized prompt. And we're passing the format, but most importantly, you can see that we're passing tools. Remember tools? Well, tools, it is this where we define the functions that need to be used by the model. Right, so once we have that response here, that's where we can extract that response and we can do other things with it. So let's go ahead and go through and attempt to parse this assistant message that we get, because remember, it could come, well, should come as a JSON, but large language models, as you know, they sometimes bring in a different format. So the idea is that we are assuming that it's going to all come as JSON, and let's go ahead and try to parse everything. Okay, so we put inside of a try. I can actually remove that because I already imported JSON. Here what we're doing is we're loading this assistant message here. as JSON, and then we put that into categorized items. Okay. And then if parsing fails, we'll try to extract JSON from the response. So we're going to go through this process of parsing and everything and get things out. And we're going to go ahead and parse everything and hopefully get the categorized items as JSON. Now, if all of that fails, then we're going to just send a message that says, hey, no valid JSON found in the assistance response. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and show here these categorized items and just dump it so we can see. Okay, let's go ahead and see if this works. So I'm going to go ahead and run this real quick here, passing in the main, and see if this works. Let's go ahead and run. Okay, loaded 49 items from the grocery list, and see if that's going to... Okay, very good. So this is exciting. So that means it works. Remember, all of this, we are not hitting any API or anything. All of this is actually local. So you're not paying for anything in terms of paying for requests that you may send to OpenAI and so forth. So this is really, really exciting. And you can see it looks good. Categorized items. You can see produce. It has all these items that are under produce category. And then we have meat, seafood. We have salmon, shrimp, sausages, and ground beef. That's true. We have dairy, all of that. So this is really good. All right. All right. So now that we know everything is working, first, let's go ahead and flatten all of these categories for further processing. Okay, so what we'll do next, let's go ahead and fetch price for all of those items. Remember, the fetch price, we're just going to call this fetch price and nutrition, which is this function here. So this is just simulating an API call, and we're just returning a mock data. So again, you could have just called an API and go from there. Okay, and then we'll just go ahead and print that out so we can see all that information, item details, and we're just going to see all of the price and nutrition data. And then what we'll do once we have this category, we're going to just pick a random category that we already have and see if we can generate an actual recipe from that category. All right, so we see random category. We just use the random dependency or class in this case, choice, and pass in the list and pass in the categorized keys as such. And then in this case, we're going to fetch recipe, because remember, fetch recipe, we pass in the category as well as the client, which knows what to do to actually generate an actual recipe. All right, so at this point we should have the actual recipe if all goes well. So let me go ahead and put some guardrails here, because things could happen with large language models. So if recipe, then we're going to go ahead and show that recipe. Else, well, failed to generate recipe. That's that day indeed. All right, so we should be good right now. Let's go ahead and save this and run real quick so we can see that indeed things are working. In fact, I can just go ahead and run like this. So it's going to do the same thing. There we go. It happens sometimes. This is large language model. This is why we should always perfect our prompt. But let's go ahead and try again. Okay, so there we go. It's still thinking, and voila, you can see it did exactly what we asked it to do. And you see here, it categorized everything. Let's go all the way. Okay, very good. So did categorization, very nice. And then start fetching each one of the items and go and fetch a data for it, like the nutritional value as well as the price and all that stuff for each one of them. And price and nutrition is just showing all the information that we got back. So for item apples, there's price, calories, fat, protein, and so forth. And for each one of those items, very, very nice. And at the end, we should see, it's a lot of information. There we go. Assistance response, recipe, roasted vegetable salad, and ingredients. All of these ingredients were created, of course, and the instructions. Step 1, do this, 2, 3, and 4. So that's the first one, and we have the recipe for category produce and so forth. All right, so this is actually working, which is really, really exciting. Let's continue. Now, the next part we need to do here is I want to be able to take this information and create a .txt file so that I have an actual text file. If I want, I can do other things with it, right? Let's go ahead and do that. It's very simple because now we know that things actually is working. Okay, so to do that, we are going to simply add some code here to make sure that we can write this text file with all this information. In this case, all of the recipe, in this case, all of the information about each one of those items, the categorization, and at the end, we're going to have, of course, a recipe. All right, so there we go. Write final results to a TXT file in a readable text format. So very simple here. We're going to go ahead first and write the categorized items. As you see here, we'll loop through and write all those items. We're also going to write the price and nutrition data. So essentially, we're mimicking exactly what we saw here, okay? The response that we get from the model, and go through all the information, all the details, and then we're going to write the actual recipe. The recipe is actually random in the sense that once we get the categorization, we just go ahead and pick one or two category, which will contain different items under that category, and pass through the large language model again to be able to create a recipe. That's essentially what it is. And once that is done, of course, and that's it. Okay, so each time we're adding that to our file, we're writing to the file. Okay, let's go ahead and give another run here real quick to make sure all is good. Okay, let's go ahead and give a final run and see. So it's going to be loading items again, and hopefully all works. Okay, very good. That's what generated. Aha, very nice. So if all goes well, we can see that we have this final, make this larger, with this final results txt, which should have all this information here. And of course, we can still see that this is what happened. We have recipe for category produce, summer squash salad, instructions and everything, right? And ingredients and all that great information here. Now, most importantly, now we have a TXT file that was created. Look at this, categorized items. There we go. All items were categorized. And then we should have the data, price and nutrition data for each one of those items. And there we go. Very nice. And at the end, we should have the recipe. Okay, so recipe for category produce. Name, summer squash salad, and look at this, ingredients in the instructions, and there we go. All right, very good. So this works, and I know this sounds or looks simple, but that's the idea. The idea is not to make this too complicated. The idea is to give you the tools you need to be able to build AI solutions that actually help you, help businesses, and you can start having ideas on how to actually do this. And that's the reason why, again, put together a community called the AI Guild, where you have like-minded entrepreneurs, coders, and people who actually want to build AI solutions using code. Okay, so this is what we have here, and the great thing is it's a growing community, and I would love to have you there, and you're gonna have a lot of fun. There's a lot of things that we have here, and I'm going to keep adding more in-depth tutorials and code templates and all this great stuff. And of course, we're gonna have calls, weekly or monthly calls, so that you can ask questions and answer questions, and have people from the industry who are doing this stuff to come talk with us and do all this great fun stuff. So come join in and let's get started. So we're able to take a list of items, grocery list, and use Ollama to pick, in this case, Llama 3.2. You could use any other model. That's the beauty of Ollama, to help us in categorize these items in our list, in our grocery list, and also simulate some sort of a API call to pick each one of those items on our list and give us the price, as well as some metadata about the fat content, protein, and all these things about each one of these items. And as a bonus, we're able to randomly pick any category that the categorizer was able to put together, and then take those items and pass through the model again to generate a fun recipe. And as you can see, it's actually a recipe that you can use. Think of this as a conversation starter. So you can take this code and make it your own and think of other things you can do. And this is something that you can use. And most importantly, you didn't have to pay anything, because this is actually locally. You can run as many times as you want, and you don't have to pay for API keys, and everything is securely on your machine. Thank you so much for your time, and till next time, be well.